Ladies and gentlemen, today's math lesson needs to be labeled at the top of your math notebook. 10, 11, and 12 as factors. Go ahead and push pause and get that labeled at the top of your notebook, and then we will begin. Here is today's lesson. Words to know, of course, is a plant, and then multiplication. You know what those are. You do not need to be writing this down. I'll let you know when you need to write something down. Right. This says, what are the patterns for multiples of 10, 11, and 12? Think about how patterns can help you multiply. So we're going to talk about patterns and how they help us, okay? How would you describe a number pattern? Think about that for a second. Always push pause when I ask you questions. I'm going to keep going. You push pause as you think about it, especially if I'm going too fast for you. Push pause and let it sink in. Think about those questions as you move on. A number pattern can be numbers that are repeated in the same order. So a number pattern can be repeated. For example, there was 4, 4, and 4. We've done this for the last week. Let's look at this. It says how many plants are in 3 dozen if there is 1 plant in each container. So 3 dozen, and there's 1 plant in each container. So we're going to look for a number pattern use multiples of 10. Well, just a minute. A dozen is 12, right? So 3 dozen, a dozen is 12. These are just multiples of 10. Let's think about how we can use multiples of 10 to get there. Is there a 10 inside of a 12? How could you use a pattern to find 10 times 9? Well, 10 times 1, 10 times 2, 10 times 3. Look at what is happening to my product. The number I'm multiplying by 10 is the number that ends up in my tens column, and I put a 0 in my ones column. So I'm just adding a 0 to the end. So I'm moving everything over one place. So 10, all I'm doing when I multiply by 10 is I'm moving over one place value. Whatever number I'm multiplying, this is a ones column, now it's in the tens column. This was in the ones column, now it's in the tens column. I'm adding a placeholder. That's all I'm doing. So what would 10 times 9 be? Answer that in your head. 90 would be correct. All right, look at the multiples of 11 and look at the pattern. We have 11 times 1, 11 times 2, 11 times 3, and look what happens to my product. My product has the same number I multiplied by in both the ones place and the tens place. So 11 times 1 is 11, 11 times 2 is 22, 11 times 3, 33, and so on. So if I continued that pattern, what would 11 times 6 equal? Go ahead and answer that in your head. And 11 times 6, you could break apart into 10 times 6, and then 1 times 6, which would equal 66, or I could use the pattern. Okay. If I were to break apart 11 times 8, let's look at this. I could break the 11 apart into a 10 and a 1, because 10 times 8 is 80, and then 1 would be left over times 8 is 8. 80 plus 8 is 88. Okay, multiples of 12, we're going to go over those and put them in your notebook in just a minute. But basically, you're just counting by 12s. Look at what happens to my ones column for the first 4 numbers. I'm sorry, my tens column. For the first 4 numbers, my tens column is going up by 1. And look at my ones column, it's going up by 2. So we could break apart the 12, and that's what I'm going to show you in just a minute. We're going to break apart the 12 into a 10 and a 2. Remember how we've done it all these other days. The 5 stays the same. I'm going to break apart the 12 into a 10 and a 2. So 10 times 5 and then a 2 times 5. And then I would add those together, and I got 60. Okay, here is what I would like for you to start writing down. You should already have this labeled at the top of your notebook. What I want you to do now is copy down in your notebook your tens. Copy all these down. I did the first 3 for you. I want you to copy them all down. Complete them. I'm going to go ahead and fill these in for you. You should have done the others on your own, and this is what you should have gotten. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120. Again, even when I get down here to these 2 digits, this is a 2-digit number. And I'm adding a 0 behind it, so that I'm adding a placeholder. So all these numbers scoot over 1, so I'm adding a placeholder, okay? So you should have your 10s written down. You should know your 10s very, very well. Let's move on to our 11s. Ignore what's going on over here right now, and I want you to write down your 11s. I want you to write all of these down. 11 times 1, 11. 11 times 2, 22. Write all these down. Fill these in until you get to 11 times 10. 11 times 10 you should already know because it was in your last pattern. But in 11 times 10, if you look over here, 11 times 10, we know that. We just are adding a placeholder. So I have the 11 and then I add a placeholder at the end. See if I can. There we go. And then, but I'm not doing 11 times 10. I'm doing 11 times 11 is what this problem up here is representing. This problem is representing 11 times 11. I don't know what 11 times 11 is, so I broke this apart into, I kept one 11 the same on both, and this 11 I broke into a 10 and a 1. 11 times 10, 110. 11 times 1, well, we know that answer. That's 11. All I have to do now is what? Exactly, I have to add those numbers together. So my 1s column, my 10s column, and my 100s column. So 11 times 11 is 121. Down here, if I look at this problem, see if I can move that down just a little bit, and I'm going to end up moving it over. Oops, I don't want to do that. We know, sorry. Let me try this. This is representing 11 times 12. This time I kept the 11s together again, so there's my 11s. I kept them, and then I broke the 12 apart into a 10 and a 2, because 10 plus 2 is 12. So when I multiply this, we know that 11 times 10 is 110. And then when I did 11 times 2, we know that 11 times 2 is 22. What is left now for me to do? I broke them apart, I multiplied them individually, and now I'm going to add them up. My 1s column, my 10s column, and my 100s column. So you should have these 11s written down in your notebook. And we are going to move on to our 12s. The main thing that I want you guys to know, you can break apart any number multiplied by 12, you can break it apart. But I want you to write down the multiples of 12 right now. You'll need to know 12 times 1 is 12, 12 times 2 is 24, 12 times 3 is 36. Go ahead and write all of those down. We are going to do one example right now. Let's say I'm asking you what 12 times 8 equals. We're going to break it apart. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been breaking apart all week. I know you can do this. I'm going to leave the 8 alone. Let's break the 12 apart, okay? Let's break the 12 apart. So I'm going to say the 12 is going to become a 10. Leave my 8. I'm going to add that to a 2 times 8. Again, my 8, this 8 right here stayed the same, right here and right here. I just made the 12 a little easier to deal with because don't we know what 10 times 8 is? Sure do. Do we know what 2 times 8 is? Sure do. So now once you've done that, 10 times 8 equals 80 plus 2 times 8 is 16, and you should be able to add these up. My 1s column is a 0 and a 6. My 10s column is an 8 and a 1. Your answer would be 96. Ladies and gentlemen, you will need to get your, after you are done and have done these examples, you will need to complete your practice worksheet 3-6 and turn that into Mrs. Johnston.